Chapter 13. Billie sat in the dining hall next to Char and sipped black coffee. She watched as the others filed in. They all looked like she felt. Dark circles beneath the eyes, pale faces, wired on nervous tension. She had awakened frightened and angry from the Queen's message, amazed at how much more real it had been. She had learned nothing new, except that the planet they would reach the next day was the right one. It had to be. The difference in dream intensity was staggering. Billie hadn't slept after her dream, and she'd heard Char scream some time after dawn. Their quarters were side by side. She glanced at her friend, worried, but the lieutenant seemed to be holding up. They had sat up together until it was time for the meeting, talking about anything but the dreams. Wilks was the last to arrive. He looked like he had slept okay. Billie felt a mild surge of envy when she remembered that he wasn't one of the dreamers. Ripley leaned against one of the tables, arms folded. After Wilks sat, she began to speak. "Good morning. I can tell nobody slept well, and we all know why. Now I'd like to hear if any of you got anything new from it." "Well, it's the right planet," said Billie. Everyone else nodded. "Fucking A," said Carvey. "Good to know," said Ripley. "Adcox, you were the only one who saw Ware before." "She's got her nest set up in a lake or a swamp," Char said. Her voice was unemotional, dead. "I couldn't tell you where exactly. Someplace warm, obviously. It's rounded, like a dome. At least part of it is. And she's much stronger than the Earth breed." Dunstan nodded. "More powerful in body and intellect," he said. "And she's got an entire legion with her. Hundreds." Ripley sighed. "Yeah, I was afraid of that. Anyone else get a fix on location?" Dr. Jones cleared his throat. "She's at the hottest part of the planet. I didn't see the shape of it, but it is in some body of shallow water, and it's wherever the temperature is most consistently warm." "Good," said Ripley. "That's good. What else?" It was quiet. Billie looked around the room. Brewster caught her gaze for a moment and smiled tiredly at her. She wondered how he was doing. He and Carvey remained silent. Falk stared at his hands, expression unreadable. Moto and Tully also looked around and waited for someone to speak. Wilks stood and broke the tension. "We're close enough to get a good read on planet type. Maybe find the hotspots. Tully, you want to do some checking?" The woman nodded and picked up her coffee mug. "Okay," Ripley said. "I know it's been rough, but we're going to be there tomorrow, and we still need to get ready for a few things. McQuaid and I are going to work on some mechanical suits after breakfast, and we could use some help. Meet down in the loading dock in half an hour." The meeting was over. Billie didn't feel particularly hungry, but she went to a food dispenser and scanned the selection anyway. Maybe eating would wake her up a little. She punched in some mad scientist's version of eggs and bread. Char followed her. "So, current crisis aside, what are we going to do when we get her to Earth?" Char said. "Anyone thought that far ahead?" "I don't know. I guess we'll worry about it if we make it that far." Char chewed at her lip, but didn't say anything else. The food arrived in little sealed biodegradable packages, hot but ugly. As Billie choked down her order of scrambled soy pro, she thought about Char's question. What were they going to do? Knowing the answers hadn't been a major part of this whole business so far, had it? Ripley was surprised by McQuaid's query. "Orona's bombs," she said. "Isn't it obvious? They were never set off." McQuaid shrugged. "I don't know about anybody named Orona." They had started on the loader suits. The others would be down in a few minutes. They were taking apart the Kurtz's 2 power loaders in an attempt to make 4 new ones. Smaller, lighter, less overall protection, but better armor than none. The sounds of their work echoed in the big chamber. Ripley laid down her wrench and turned to McQuaid. Orona was a government scientist. He conceived a plan to detonate nuclear bombs in the infested areas. He got it set up, but then died before they could be triggered. Why didn't somebody else do it? It was Ripley's turn to shrug. Some malfunction, maybe. Maybe somebody got cold feet when it came time to push the button. Probably anybody who could say is dead. McQuaid snorted. "Well, that's why we're here, Captain." She picked up the wrench and started in on one of the loader clamps. "So how did you find out about Orona?" said McQuaid. Ripley unhooked the mechanical arm and set it on the floor. "Common knowledge, or so I thought." "Yeah, it just seems that the Corps would have access to that information, and I never heard of it." Ripley gave him a tight grin. "That's the military for you. A group dedicated to making sure nobody gets to know what they know. They hoard little bits of trivia like diamonds, and shit steel bricks if anybody finds out. Even when most people couldn't care less, much less use it for some diabolical purpose." She suddenly remembered who she was talking to. "No offense meant." "None taken. I agree with you. The Marine involvement in this crisis has been poorly organized from the start. Bunch of generals running around and flapping their arms and basically achieving zero. It's why I'm here." They went back to work, setting aside the pieces of machinery to be reassembled later. Ripley liked McQuaid. He knew what he was doing and worked quickly and efficiently. At this rate, they'd be half done before anyone showed up. That McQuaid didn't know about the bombs, though. She tried to recall who had told her about Orona's plan, and drew a blank. She had heard it somewhere after the second LV-426 trip, but before Gateway. Brewster, Carvey, Adcox and Billie arrived at the dock and headed towards them. McQuaid raised an eyebrow at Ripley. "Go ahead," she said. "They are Marines." She watched as McQuaid gave orders. Billie sat on the floor and sorted out different sized holding pins and screws, while the 3 soldiers set to work on cannibalizing the second loader. Power wrenches hummed, the smell of lube and reluctant to move metal hung in the air. Funny that McQuaid had looked to her before he ordered the Marines. She knew that the crew thought of her as the leader, but was vaguely surprised that it felt so natural. She turned her mind back to the project and made a mental note to ask the others about Orona after lunch. Wilks leaned over Tully's shoulder and scanned the readout on the planet. "Atmosphere's breathable, but just barely," she said. "High in contaminants, low in oxygen." "Could be worse," said Wilks. "Bulking around out there in a climate suit would be a bitch." "Plenty of water, almost 80% ocean and plenty of lakes. Nasty too. Full of trace elements and probably local bugs. Drinking it wouldn't do you any good." Wilks leaned closer. Gravity was almost half a G higher than Earth's. Good thing their crew was a strong group physically. "Don't drink the water, don't breathe the air." "Huh?" "Old joke. What else?" he said. "Weather, plants, animals." "It's windy," said Tully. "At least in the mountainous regions. Landing should be a thrill. Vegetation must live on heat and poison, 'cause the sun don't shine much through the cloud cover. It won't be pretty. Got to be some animals, though I haven't seen any. Wilks heard that. Fucking monsters had to eat something. It could be worse, but they were about to set down on a hot, wet, poisoned planet where jogging would be an effort for the strongest of them. To try and overpower the almighty top-of-the-heap queen fucking head alien on her own ground. Great. Well, hey, no problem. The Marines were lean, mean, and obscene. Yeah, right. Okay, he said. See if you can pinpoint the warmest areas for the flyby tomorrow. He leaned against the wall and watched Tully dig for the information. The Mother Queen had no doubt picked a charming spot to build her home, and she probably wouldn't want to move without a fight. Another bad place to die. And as he had thought so many times before, it was probably going to happen this trip. The universe could only pass out so much luck to any one guy, and he'd sure as shit gone through his share a long while ago. Well, what the hell? If it was your turn, there wasn't anything you could do. And if it wasn't, he guessed he'd find out soon enough.